Hi, welcome to Bad Takes. I'm Laura McGann, the executive editor of Grid, and I'm here with my co-host, Matthew Iglesias, contributing editor to Grid. Hey, Matt.
Hello.
So, today, you've got a bad take for us, right?
We do. We want to talk about Kanye West, who has been embroiled in a kind of a festival of bad takes. but a particular one I want to go with is the CEO of Parler, which is a kind of alternative social media network that Ye says he's going to buy, made the following remark in the sort of acquisition announcement. He says, Ye is making a groundbreaking move into the free speech media space and will never again have to fear being removed from social media. Once again, Ye proves that he is one step ahead of the legacy media narrative. Now, I think this is a very questionable characterization of what has been going on here.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't know, so say you didn't know about this controversy, you might listen to this and think, wow, he was maligned or pushed off some other platform because of his political views, but maybe we should recap what got him in trouble.
I mean, this is, Kanye himself in this announcement said that, conservative views were being silenced on social media. But the views in question here, it's not like he was, posting some like Hayek takes on central planning or something. This all started, he wore a White Lives Matter t-shirt to Paris Fashion Week, which was controversial. I mean, that's a deliberate provocation.
Sure.
And it was controversial, but nobody kicked him off any platforms for that. But apparently, he and Diddy were texting back and forth about this, with Diddy criticizing him. And then Ye posted one of these screenshots of this text exchange on Instagram. And what he said in the message that was put on Instagram is, I'm going to use you as an example to show the Jewish people that told you to call me that no one can threaten or influence me. I told you this was war. So he was then put into some kind of Instagram penalty box. He got an Instagram timeout. It was a pretty spicy take. But then he went to Twitter where he says, I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people in all caps. The funny thing is, I actually can't be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jews also. You guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who opposes your agenda. So that got him suspended from Twitter. So this is the censorship that we are talking about, and it comes in the context of, I would say, a larger set of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that Kanye has been offering on a range of media, podcasts and, personal appearances, and also in an interview with Tucker Carlson.
Right. So I think you just laid out the most recent developments, which is he gets booted off Twitter for his DEFCON 3 comment. I think it's worth, I'm going to establish here that I am not an extreme, I guess I'm a bit of a cancel culture skeptic that in general.
But which side is a skeptic?
Oh, I would say I am more lenient of people's views, that political views, let a thousand flowers bloom. I'm just not that. I don't get that exercised about people having extreme political views. But looking at this situation, I see what Twitter was doing here, that this was not somebody with an extreme political view, but he's trumpeting a really hateful conspiracy theory with deep historical legacy. To me, it seems pretty obvious that what's going on here is Twitter said, yeah, this is a bridge too far. This is not, this is not protected political speech. This is some type of, not protected in a sense of allowed. I'm just saying I see what Twitter was doing here, and I don't have a big objection to kicking someone off your platform for calling DEFCON 3 on the Jews.
Well, also, in terms of takes, right? I think a reasonable person could say that Instagram was maybe too hasty with this, or even that Twitter shouldn't censor anti-Semitic tweets. That's like, you can talk on the phone to your friend and you can say the most hateful, vile stuff in the world, and the phone company is not going to cancel your service.
Sure.
Right? That's a philosophy that we have about how telephone service should be regulated. It's fine. You would not hold up somebody's demented anti-Semitic phone conversation and be like, this is the guy, right? Like, that to me is what was so odd about that Parler take, right? Like, there have been so many different content moderation controversies.
Well, the thing is that Twitter and Instagram are not like a private phone call.
Right.
They're broadcast to the world. Look, on the Instagram one, first of all, I looked at that. I was like, not cool, Kanye. You don't want to screenshot you. And when you start posting Slacks and DMs and text messages, just, with your buddy, like, not cool. But that shouldn't get you kicked off Instagram. I'm just saying it's not cool. And
maybe
then
it
two,
should.
Maybe it should be. Maybe we need to assess this. Two, I don't know, borderline case. The comment, look kind of violent,
Yeah.
I wouldn't boot him off permanently, but I'm not looking at Instagram going, whoa, that's outrageous. It feels like a borderline case, and it's not saying he wants to, go to war with P. Diddy over this situation just doesn't, I don't know. I get what you're saying. There's an argument there of this was too far and this is, whatever the case. But I think what we're not,
DEFCON 3.
Yeah.
On Jewish people.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you have a situation where, the world did go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, like not that long ago, I don't want to sound flip here. It just, like, I don't know. It's bad. Like, that's just a really bad thing to say, and pretty hateful. And also, you've got some evidence that there's rising violence against Jewish people in America, and there clearly has been, I'm pretty sure that the Southern Poverty Law Center has documented a rise in attacks on synagogues and the like. So, when you're Kanye West and you have this huge following, somebody said he has more followers than there are Jews in the world or something like that, that you kind of, I think that's what they said, or in America. But the point being, he has a huge following. We know that this is real, that he's not saying DEFCON 3 against a group of people who are not likely to be victims of violence. So anyway, I don't even know I just feel on its face, prima facie case, this is pretty bad. And I get why he's being kicked off.
Yeah, so Carly Pildes, the director of community engagement at the Anti-Defamation League, she said, Kanye West has more Twitter followers than there are Jews in the world. I can't I don't think there is a definitive count of the global Jewish population, but that does look correct to my eyeball, as well as being something that she said. So I want to further contextualize this with Tucker Carlson.
Yes,
because
this is also important, right? It made sense for us to start at the end and go backward, but this is key. So back us up and tell us what happened with Tucker Carlson.
So Kanye wears the White Lives Matter t-shirt, and he takes a lot of criticism from a lot of people. But other people, like that T-shirt. They like the statement. It's a conservative provocation. So Tucker Carlson airs a segment with Kanye in which Kanye expresses his admiration for Donald Trump. He talks about why he wore a White Lives Matter T-shirt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on the air. After that segment airs, the House Judiciary Committee Republicans Twitter feed, where these are it's a really online committee feed, but they do a post where it says like, Elon, yay, Trump, so it's like,
right.
So it's like Tucker Carlson and an official organ of the House Republican Party is like building Kanye up as this like conservative figure because of his White Lives Matter stand. The Carlson segment, of course, was edited. I mean, like all cable news segments, or almost all cable news segments. It's not every single thing that Tucker said on the show. But the Daily Beast revealed, after this came out, after the Twitter controversy, the Daily Beast revealed that in the interview with Carlson, Ye said all kinds of anti-Semitic stuff, right? I mean, he says, I prefer my kids' new Hanukkah than Kwanzaa. At least it will come with some financial engineering. And that's like maybe a joke. I don't know. I'm Jewish. If somebody in my family told that joke, like, we would laugh. Kanye says it, maybe not so much. But he goes further. He's like, think about us judging on each other, on how white we would talk. You know, a Jewish person judging another Jewish person on how good they danced or something. And then he says, oh, we should probably edit that out. But then he goes on to say, when I say Jew, I mean the 12 lost tribes of Judah, the blood of Christ, who the people known as the race black really are. This is who our people are, the blood of Christ. This, as a Christian, is my belief. And then he says that Planned Parenthood was founded with the KKK to control the Jew population. And this seems to be a mishmash of sort of right-wing tropes that Kanye is getting into with stuff that residents of the urban Northeast may be familiar, come from the Black Hebrew Israelites, which is a group of people you will find screaming weird stuff on street corners in D.C. and New York and elsewhere. And, I mean, this put Tucker in an awkward position, I think, because he wanted to have this celebrity on to talk about why he thinks conservative politics is good. But what the celebrity actually did was say a bunch of nutty, anti-Semitic, borderline incoherent stuff. And so now, I mean, if you're Tucker Carlson, I think you've got some tough choices, right? You can say, look, there's something wrong with this guy, and, like, we can't do the segment.
Right, but...
Or you can say, okay, I need to do a segment about how, like, conservatives may have been enthusiastic about this White Lives Matter T-shirt, but, like, I need to tell you, like, this guy is going kind of off the rails.
Yes.
And those are both, like, I totally get, as, like, a media content professional, why you would not like either of those options. Right. They're bad for business. But what he chose to do, to, like, edit the interview to pretend that Kanye was making a much more coherent line of argument than this, like, that's really bad. I mean, it seems almost banal to get on your high horse about media ethics, but, like, you're really not supposed to do that. If you come to interview someone about their interesting takes and it turns out that they're... I don't want to, like, do remote mental health diagnosis, but there's a reason none of that stuff aired, right? Like, Tucker's team knew that was not the opinions of a sober-minded person making the case for conservative politics.
So here's what I can't believe, I've thought a lot about this. And I've thought about, okay, I'm an editor, I'm reading through the transcript of this. I can't believe I'm saying I'm 1% even at all sympathetic to this. If you're having somebody on to talk about their Black Lives Matter position, and then they say this weird thing where you kind of squint at it and it's like, is that anti-Semitism? Is that, like, you sort of half listen to the like Black Israelites on the corner of 14th and Irving, or what are you saying? It's, like, kind of confusing and seems somewhat jarbled and kind of irrelevant in your mind to other thoughts. Would I leave it out? Like, if you had an aside, you know, in an interview with somebody that felt irrelevant, you would cut it out. I would cut it out. Like, sure. Sometimes there's irrelevant sides where it's like, yeah, we're going to cut this out because it's just not relevant. Is it not relevant? I, in this case, fall on the side of this was relevant. I do. I'm just putting out there.
Well, let me explain the why.
All right. Okay. I am just putting out there that I am somewhat sympathetic to editing down interviews to the crux of the interview.
Yes, but if the subject of the interview is cancel culture, right, and how, like, the left, you know, doesn't want you to say something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and what the person actually starts talking about is a Jewish media conspiracy, like, that's directly relevant, right? Like, this is a very long time, well-entrenched, I don't love the phrase, like, anti-Semitic tropes, but, like, this is what anti-Semites believe about America and the media, is that Jews control the media and are using their control over the media and Hollywood to do nefarious things. Now, when I hear Tucker Carlson going on and on about, like, elites and globalists doing this and that, like, my anti-Semite radar goes off.
Sure.
Right? But then also my trying to be a rational, fair-minded person radar is like, look, it is true that I have suspicions about what people mean when they say that stuff, but also, like, in its text, they are just saying that there are people who run the media and they have values that are different from ours and they're not authentically rooted in the nation state, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're talking about a Jewish conspiracy. But then if you, like, start talking literally
when you
about
lay it
a
out
Jewish
there,
conspiracy, it's like, okay, like, it's central to now, like, my understanding of what Kanye's understanding of what's going on is, right? Like, he's texting Diddy to say that Jews are controlling him and like are making him silence him in this way. And, you know, and of course, like, it is factually true that there are a lot of Jewish people working in the entertainment industry and working in the media. So, like, I understand why people incline toward anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, like, develop this kind of view and this kind of take, right? But, like, it's very bad. Like, this does a lot of harm to the world, and I think it's really not cool for Tucker Carlson to just, because he would get so upset, right? I mean, I don't know. He might not take notice of me, but, you know, if a big media outlet, if the New York Times ran like a big Tucker Carlson piece, and they were like, Tucker Carlson traffics all day and all night in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, right? Like, all he does on his show is talk about how these unnamed, rootless cosmopolitans in their coastal cities are just denying the values of the American people. Like, he would take offense to that characterization of what he's doing, and then, like, he sees Kanye West doing that, and he's just like, well, I'm going to pretend that's not what happened so that I can feed this grievance machine about conservatives being censored.
Right. Well, I agree that that's most likely the scenario of what Tucker Carlson was doing, that there is this overarching narrative that's happening right now in political media or American politics right now of creating this narrative of big tech, big media is out to get conservatives, and he wants to feed into that. I would also say there's a weird thing going on in the media sometimes with views like this. One of the co-hosts of Higher Learning, a popular podcast, Van Lathan. So he used to be at TMZ. And he said a few years ago, it was like 2018, he does an interview with Kanye West. And Kanye West, at that point, it was that one of those interviews where he talks about slavery and blames black people for being enslaved. Mm-hmm. And that airs, you know, like, that's fine. That's a fine thing, apparently. That's totally fine to say. But Van Lathan says that TMZ, there's this part where you kind of, if you go back and listen to the episode of the interview, it's like this kind of weird clipped section, and what Van Lathan is saying was clipped out is an anti-Semitic tirade that Kanye had gone on in 2018, and so he's not surprised now that Kanye West is out here saying this thing because there's a continuity there.
Right.
But TMZ, you know, they also had a vision of what they wanted to put out there, right? Like, they wanted to air a certain version of him. I don't think that they had the same interests as Tucker Carlson, but yet did the same thing. And it's sort of this thing that happens in media where you take out the part you don't like to create something. So I'm not disagreeing.
I agree.
I'm just removing anti-Semitic comments in some context of, there is a tradition in media of cutting out things that we pretend didn't happen, whether it is an anti-Semitic thing or maybe a racist or gendered thing. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm adding to your point that there is a culture of this that runs deeper than Tucker Carlson didn't just invent the idea of let's cut out the anti-Semitic stuff because we want to make a point, or we want to use Kanye to make a point. That has happened to Kanye West before.
I agree. I agree with that. I am, though, trying to say, though, right? I mean, the whole thing of this is, it's curious that this particular person and this particular set of events is one conservatives have chosen to hold up
Okay.
as their go-to
Yeah.
example of why. I mean, not the only one, right?
Yeah.
But like, because on some level, I think you and I both sympathize actually with the view that left-wing people in the media have gotten too censorious about what it is people are allowed to say.
Yeah.
But if I were to try to make that point, I would want to hold up like my strong examples of overly censorious behavior, and to rush in and hold this up, I feel like
Yes, not the strongest.
It's both like
both
like a weak case to take to court, but it also suggests to me that like something's really off with the people doing this, right? Like why?
Here's where
Why is a rap star making tons of incoherent rambling about the nature of Black history, about the nature of Jewish identity? You know, like is this your free speech champion? Now, I assume the Parler people who are selling to Kanye, they just like want money,
sure,
which is as good a reason as any.
I mean,
for saying something stupid.
They're trying to dump Parler, is what's happening there.
But like, you know, in Bloomberg this morning, we're reading that he's having another sit down with Donald Trump,
right?
Who himself posted a crazy thing on Truth Social about how Jews are ungrateful.
Okay, so let's pause here about this and say, I made my point about anti-Semitism and it being weeded out in past interviews. What is telling to me and important here is, when the Tucker Carlson interview airs, there was, like you said, there was the committee kind of put out the statement. There was also a piece we both read in the Federalist, basically presenting Kanye as this conservative folk hero, right? Then
who's undeterred by your cancel culture.
Exactly. So then the Daily Beast says, "Hey, FYI, there was this other stuff that was cut from the interview," and then, you know, I would say, if I had run something like that in Grid and you wrote it for me, I'd be like, hey, Matt, you know, what do you want to do about your column now? You know, like you kind of
want to revisit this?
Yeah, maybe you need to take into account, you know, the anti-Semitic rants in this context, because this seems like maybe you don't have the right take here, or if you stand by the take, I guess I'll entertain that. But it's like a key thing happened, and you would revisit it. And the two things I have seen happen are, one, not revisiting it, like, oh, well, like, we'll just leave that column there. Or I guess three things. Or you've got Donald Trump saying, yeah, anyway, about the Jews, which is wild. Or three, let's not actually talk about what he said. Let's not talk about that part. We'll just kind of focus on this is about his speech and attacks on conservatives. So given that context, I think that this is clearly an attempt to hold Kanye West up as a popular figure that sides with conservative ideas right now. And it's very satisfying to own the libs with somebody who maybe was formerly considered a liberal himself, a popular culture figure himself. So I see that in terms of the fallout.
Okay, let's take a break, and I want to talk about some of these bigger picture trends. I do want to sort of focus on this question about Parler and free speech and just sort of what should be celebrated, because, you know, our former colleague Jane Coaston, who's at the Times now, you know, she used to talk a lot about the idea of guardrails in like a movement, right? In political movement, a set of social institutions. And I think it's especially important if you believe in free speech, if you don't want a sort of like really heavy-handed, kind of like rules-driven, platform-dictated sort of thing, to exert some kind of guardrails and discipline. And that, to me, is what I think is the really bad take here. That Ye is not a deep thinker on public policy issues.
Right.
That's not who he is, right? He's a celebrated recording artist and sometime fashion entrepreneur.
Sure.
And so you just you have to ask yourself in life when you are like deliberately taking on somebody to be like, I want to hold this person up as a representative of my movement, as somebody who people in my cause should care a lot about what they say. You have to think about that. And like, why do you want to do that? Right. And the best reason to sort of draw a celebrity entertainer into a political movement is because that person is making like a really banal point that has like almost no content to it. Like I remember Taylor Swift saying that she believed in marriage equality,
sure,
and that was important. And
right.
It's like great, right? It's like it's so simple, right? And so it's like we want Taylor Swift fans to hear this important but like very analytically simple kind of point. The whole Kanye thing just reeks of this kind of like desperation to own the libs by finding a black person to say something provocative about race, right? With like so much interest in doing that you don't pay any attention at all to like, does he know what he's talking about? Does this person have any information at all? Because you could put.
Okay, I am going to interrupt. Okay. Anyway, whatever haters in the threads, I am interrupting Matt, because if you don't interrupt Matt, he will talk forever. So I have thought, I agree with this. I also think there's this uncomfortable example going on right now with Herschel Walker, where he's a black candidate who, says the things that conservatives want to hear, but then they're kind of looking away from, a lot of uncomfortable stuff, like paying his ex-girlfriend's abortion tab, or
holding a gun to his wife's head.
So that's actually a very good example, right? That the right now is attacking liberals for airing an ad where they say there's audio video, there's a clip of his ex-wife saying that he held a gun to her head while they were married, and she describes really terrifying abuse. And the argument that conservatives are making are, this is ridiculous. Herschel Walker's being smeared because it was an interview where Herschel Walker was there, and she's saying that she has forgiven him for that behavior. In terms of poor editing, I mean, that's great that his ex-wife has forgiven him, but it's a salient fact in his history that this is something he did and admits that he did, and it's violent behavior against women that he, had a history of displaying. And like, if you're gonna hold up a conservative or something, like somebody for being attacked, of like, look at the liberals, attacking somebody, or the media editing something wrong, maybe you don't want to hold up the guy who had a gun to his wife's head, or the guy who's spouting anti-Semitic stuff.
But also, if I was to ask a conservative, if I was to ask Tucker Carlson or the editors of The Federalist or the House Judiciary Committee, if I were to ask them, what do you guys think about affirmative action? Right? They would probably say, well, we're concerned that we are diluting important meritocratic qualities in the pursuit of diversity. But then you look at like how the conservative movement structures itself, knowing that there's just a very small share of the black population is Republicans, but like they want to put up Herschel Walker to run against Raphael Warnock. They want Kanye West to counter Black Lives Matter messaging, right? And they are reaching for people who are like not at all informed about public policy issues, right? Like the state of Georgia is not lacking in just like regular politicians who would not have the kind of scandals that have dogged Herschel Walker, who can talk coherently about issues. I mean, because separate from any of these scandals, these other things, like he was up on a debate and he's saying, like people with diabetes just need to eat better. Like he doesn't know type 1 diabetes exists, right? And it's dumb, and it's sort of a gaffe, but it also just reflects the fact that like he's a former football star with no background in politics at all in a state that's like been historically very Republican, has tons of Republican House members,
There's
down ballot statewide
there's
officials.
very serious Republicans running around Georgia who could represent the state of Georgia and actually understand the policy principles.
And to Kanye, right? I mean, during the summer of 2020, when I was doing an interview podcast, I thought that it would be interesting to put on a Black person who had some skeptical views about the Black Lives Matter movement. So I interviewed John McWhorter, who's a professor at Columbia, who has done a lot of work on these things and who, you agree with him or disagree with him, is like a thoughtful, interesting person. But also, even though he is much more conservative than most Black Americans and gets into a lot of controversy with this stuff, he won't tell you, well, racism doesn't exist.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Or
no.
there's stuff like that, right?
He just,
because
no.
he's thought about this stuff, whereas Kanye, I guess there's so much interest in the idea of this figure that there's so much willingness to skip past, why are we interviewing him on this subject, that you then get into these insane parts of it where it's well, we'll just edit that out.
Right. I also want to talk about, I feel like I'm watching the Kanye story unfold in a totally, in another context, which to me is really relevant here, which is we know that Kanye West was diagnosed with bipolar disorder a number of years ago, 2016 or some such. And in the media, I think it is correct that we don't look at somebody and try to diagnose them from afar.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that. That said, I'm looking at this behavior, and you just look at him in some of these interviews and his overall, just how he seems, how he's coming across. And then you look at his behavior on Twitter. He's definitely saying things that only make sense in a delusional world. He also on Tucker Carlson was talking about how people who work at the Gap knew that Uvalde was coming ahead of time. And
he seemed to suggest that fake child actors were infiltrating his home.
Yeah. Look, this is a person who is displaying signs of delusional thinking that he truly believes, or like you're saying, kind of paranoid thinking that he seems to believe, and a hyper energy for an extended period of time. He's making seemingly impulsive decisions. Look, I wouldn't say this is definitely a manic episode, but this is definitely something where, I'm reading the Bloomberg piece this morning. It was perfectly reported. It had all the facts. He had an there's reference to, he made an anti-Semitic outburst and he's buying Parler, and Bloomberg is a business publication. And so they're writing it as a business article. And I'm reading it going, are we not going to kind of talk about the emperor has no clothes situation here, where, somebody had, I don't know, Joe Biden has arthritis in his knee and he's sort of limping across the stage. I feel like Joe Biden, who has arthritis in his knee, has been limping. It wouldn't be like, what? Sure. Why was he limping across the stage? Who's to say? And I get on the one hand the need to not diagnose somebody from afar, but then there's just the obvious situation here where he is behaving in a way that fits into a serious diagnosis that he has said he's talked about it. He's talked about medication and other things. His family members or his ex-wife has talked about it, and she actually once said something herself about how hard it is to watch someone you love have episodes like this, that these things happen. And the reason I say all of this is not, there's one way to look at this as, therefore we should excuse his behavior. No.
I was going to say, I do think that that's one reason why people have started downplaying it, is that when DEFCON 3 first happened, I saw a lot of chatter that was like, oh, this is a manic episode. And then there was this kind of pushback that was like, well, mental health problems don't make you do racism. And I'm sort of two minds about that. Like,
well, look,
they don't, but also they kind of do.
Well, look, what we know about bipolar disorder is that people who experience mania can exist, the way that they're seeing the world in that moment of mania seems like a real world structure to them, but it's not, right? That it's a sort of delusional space where they see themselves in a light that's just not true. They've experienced grandeur. People sometimes do experience sort of psychosis during these episodes. And these are people who are probably not eating and sleeping at the same time, which it's unclear what factor that has. But whether or not Kanye believes these things, the behavior is not a person who is in a normal state, but it appears to be somebody who is in a different state. And so, but my point here is not to excuse what someone says. You're responsible for your actions. He's fully aware that he has bipolar disorder. He has resources, for treatment and other things. And anyway, it is a complex disorder because for various reasons people feel fine and they don't take medication. And it's anything that anybody has a family member or friend or a personal experience around mental health, the challenges of it. What I see happening here, and it frustrates me more broadly about coverage of mental health, is I think it is a good thing that media has normalized talking about depression. What bothers me often is that when we say the phrase mental health, it's a stand-in for depression. And when we start talking about people who have other disorders or problems, whether it's bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, or are experiencing some type of a psychosis or a delusion, that these things become other. Depression is a thing, and it's okay. We all accept that people go through depressive episodes, or it becomes it's almost, I would say, a normalized thing to talk about in the media. But then when somebody is displaying other types of mental health problems, it becomes this other people experience those things, or that these are people, people who experience these types of symptoms or disorders are somehow, they're not the mainstream. There's a mainstream conversation in the media that happens, and that depression is common, and we talk about it, and we should be open about it. But, mania or schizophrenia or, in Herschel Walker's case, he says he's been diagnosed with what used to be called multiple personality disorder, and I think it's now dissociative identity disorder. And so these are things that it bothers me that there is.
Yeah, it's kind of selective.
It's a
filtering.
Selective filtering, and when you do that, it's sort of marginalizing people who have these things, and it's also sort of saying, when we're like, whoa, it's so wacky, it's so weird, it's so out there, and not saying, hey, actually, we know that this happens to a lot of people, and we should be thoughtful about how we interview people when they're in this state, or what does it mean to cover people who are clearly have these diagnoses. And I don't have the answers here, right? I think it's important to cover this Kanye situation.
Okay, so
it's et cetera. But I just want to underscore that I think that there is a media question here more broadly about how you handle mental health and how we talk about it and what we mean.
So I think that's a great point, and I don't have the answer either. So I want to drag this back to content moderation.
But don't dismiss my point.
I'm not dismissing your point.
You kind of are, though. You said I want to drag it back to another point, but I think it's really important.
I agree.
I think it's important, and I think that, you like your reaction of like, that's nice, let's talk about something else, says
no.
points.
I think that it relates, though.
All right. Well,
because okay, so Elon Musk is maybe or maybe not buying Twitter. And it's known that one of his stated objectives is to kind of ease off on the censorship and the content moderation piece of this. But Musk also said after the DEFCON 3 tweet that he reached out to Kanye to talk to him, and Musk represented it as they'd had a good conversation and Kanye understood that he wasn't going to say this stuff anymore. And then he went and said more stuff, right? And that in part reflects, I think, as you were saying, what seems to be a manic behavior on Kanye's part, right? That you can a lack of separate from the ideas, right? Just a lack of self-control.
Right.
You're having a conversation with a politically aligned billionaire who is buying the platform that you want to not be kicked off of. And you're in a discussion.
Yes.
And he's okay, I'm not going to say that anymore. And then you just do it again, right?
Right.
From Musk's perspective, I think this reveals two things, right? Or similarly, Tucker Carlson doesn't air that stuff.
Right.
Right? Because people have a sense, again, not being clinicians, not an official diagnosis, but you can have a sense as an interviewer, as an editor of videotape, as just a billionaire entrepreneur who knows people and sees things. Okay, this guy is unwell, right? I am going to decide, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, whatever, that this thing does not reflect the person's truest or best self, whatever it is. I'm going to edit it out. I'm going to talk to him. As a solution to what you put on primetime cable news, that at least functions, right? They have all this tape, they edit it, they think about every night what goes on. And so even a huge anti-cancel culture, free speech guy like Tucker Carlson, he selects what goes on television. Twitter isn't like that. Elon Musk can call up Kanye West because Ye is much more famous than most people.
Right.
But that's not a scalable solution. Right?
Yeah, Elon Musk calling people is not the way to go.
There's tens of millions of people on Twitter.
Sure.
He can't have a personal conversation with every single person who seems to be going off the rails.
Right.
And we know that in addition to there being people with bigoted sentiments and things like that in the world, there are also lots of people with different kinds of problems doing different kinds of things. And you just you would try not to put someone on the radio or on television or on your podcast while they're having a manic episode, right? And when it happens on a high enough level, Elon Musk sees, this isn't good.
Right.
Right? I don't want... nobody is actually
Elon
so
Musk,
free speechy.
yeah.
And the Parler guy, too, right? The Parler guy didn't say, it's good that Kanye is taking over because finally we're going to tell the truth about the Jews.
Right, yeah.
Right? He gets very elliptical. Free speech, blah,
yes.
blah, blah. But, actually nobody wants their platform to be, a sewer of, genocidal threats and
yes.
other stuff like that. It would be bad. It's bad for business. Everybody knows that. And I think it just reflects that this is I think you can be critical of the way Twitter or Facebook has implemented its content moderation, but you should recognize that it's not all political games or bad faith or nonsense or censorship, that it's actually really challenging to think about how do you want to manage a platform that is this big in a world that is full of sincere, harsh political disagreements, but also full of bigots and also full of people in different kinds of mental health crises that, we don't have an easy way to insta remote diagnose exactly what's going on with this guy, right? It's challenging, right? And we struggle, you and I struggle to say exactly how should you characterize these situations or how should you handle them while doing artisanal journalism. And it's how are you going to do that at the scale of Facebook?
Right.
I sincerely don't know. And I think that when you think about the policy decisions that these companies are making, you have to acknowledge that it's an incredibly challenging problem and possibly just not a good idea to have discourse happening at the scale of Facebook. But as long as it is, I don't think this kind of idea that, it's just going to be like a free-for-all with no censorship or anything, and everyone's going to love that. I mean, you can try it, but like I don't think it's going to work out very well. And I think the fact that Elon Musk saw Ye's tweets and is like, I got to get this guy to chill out, it just like reveals that like he knows in his gut that like that's not good. That if you have the most popular musicians in the world saying stuff like this constantly on Twitter, normal people are going to start right. You're going to get negative selection.
Yeah.
It's going to become a platform for like crazy people.
I don't love the phrase "a platform for crazy people." It will be a platform for, people who aren't bothered by DEFCON 3 comments about Jews. Anyway, I think that you're right on that, and I think Elon Musk is looking at this going, I think there is a genuine argument, kind of getting back to actually Jane's point about guardrails, that you would think, I think early days, kind of blocking the internet, comment threads, that there would be some sort of accountability, or that the community would create guardrails amongst themselves that, okay, if somebody's acting out, you tell that person, like, shut up, like this is not, we're not going to reward this kind of behavior, that these communities can be self-regulated in a way where it's going to continue to be a free exchange of ideas, et cetera. And frankly, that's not what happened. That is not what happened at all. And now we're left in this position of, well, so therefore do you have to make rules to enforce them because culturally people are not staying within the bounds? I think some stuff is a little bit easier to kind of, to monitor than others. Like, and I think there's also this idea of do you kick someone off or on, or leave someone on or kick them off? But I think it wouldn't be that hard to do more deleting of tweets on a case-by-case basis.
Right. But what we've seen from Ye is that he is experiencing these efforts to sort of brush him back as further evidence of the conspiracy.
This is
right?
the problem with anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, right? Is that it's not, I don't want to say normal hate, but if you have some racist belief about a group of people or somebody, it's a little different than anti-Semitism, which is, it's a conspiracy theory that this is this group of people who control everything. So then if somebody pushes back against you, it confirms. It's like a cycle, like a loop of anti-Semitism.
Right. Well, and so I mean,
it becomes a problem when the thing that you're saying is problematic because you're repeating a conspiracy theory about how Jews control the media, and then you perceive this being kicked off Twitter as the Jews kicking you off Twitter. It really feeds into itself and into a loop.
And so you look at somebody like Mel Gibson, say, right, who has said a number of anti-Semitic things over the years, and who I know some people feel that he should be more canceled than he is over that kind of thing. I enjoy Mel Gibson's work as an actor and as a director. And I also, as a Jewish person, am sort of glad that Hollywood has not fully blackballed Mel Gibson because I think it would reinforce these like paranoia and conspiracy theories, and that it's like shows the world that it's like, I don't know, like it's not true. Like, he's a very talented actor and director who has some really repugnant opinions that he has occasionally voiced, but he can continue to act, and we can say, like, The Road Warrior is a great movie, and, so on and so forth. That being said, I also don't see anyone being like, we got to get Mel Gibson on
Right,
Twitter,
we got to get, we
right?
need to give this guy a Twitter account.
Or we need to put him on our politics show.
Right.
To, like, explain why Democrats are bad.
Yeah.
Because I think most people, including people I have very profound political disagreements with, recognize that, like, you don't want to be the Mel Gibson party, right? And what's so weird to me and disturbing about the Kanye situation is not to the extent to which he is or isn't being censored, but the extent to which he's being specifically amplified. because the idea of a black celebrity fighting with Black Lives Matter is like so appealing to conservatives that it's overriding like all the rest of their judgment about this situation.
Right.
Right? It's like the Federalist was like so into that T-shirt.
Right. Yes. That the troll worked. I mean, just, yeah, I remember. I mean, I saw it on Instagram and everything, the T-shirt and stuff. And it was absolutely this victory lap on the internet of, woohoo, this is somebody who represents what we've been saying. And it's very exciting that it's somebody who, yeah.
Right, he's famous,
yeah,
and then
they're
like, they're trying to cancel him. And then when this comes out, as you were saying, right? I mean, now I'm just repeating, so we should probably come to a close. But there's no like, whoops, we got that one wrong. It's just kind of like, we're going to shuffle away from this whole thing.
Shuffle away, exactly. Yeah, and I guess to your point about Mel Gibson, I think it is telling that somebody who already has an anti-Semitic reputation is not really being trotted out as here's somebody we want on our side. It's a kind of, well, maybe not. I think that the Kanye situation, it seemed like there was some plausible deniability of we can kind of downplay this stuff, by cutting it out and all that. So, look, I think that it sounds like we disagree, but we don't. I don't know. I agree with all of this. And I agree that this is a just bananas decision if you're the sort of like bananas for the conservative movement to suspend reality and to like go hard on this. I just think it's bananas. It's not a political thing. It's just a bizarre choice to make, and one that is potentially damaging to your own cause. It doesn't make a lot of long-term sense to me, number one. But number two, I think that what is important about the Kanye saga is this question of how does media talk about mental health, and who do we write off as crazy and who do we say needs help, and when is it acceptable to talk about disorders and when is it not? And I think that is something that's going to, I think that this case of Kanye, who knows what happens, does he stay a folk hero, does he not? It'll blow over. Whether or not we deal with the question of who is acceptable, like what is acceptable mental health to talk about and what is too taboo, is something that's going to keep happening and playing out over and over for a very long time.
I agree with that. But I mean, I think a good sort of first cut at it is to try to, I don't know, because now I'm getting in my own head about like which words I want to use. But there's a certain, you can tell when you see it that somebody is not being thoughtful in their public statements.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like whatever you want to attribute that to, right? And I don't know, I almost feel like we should be trying to have enough guardrails that we're not getting so close to the question of, is this a manic episode or isn't it?
Right.
That we should be asking the question, is this person equipped to make a thoughtful contribution to a policy discussion of some kind? I mean, I know that sounds like very high-minded relative to the current media climate, right? But it's like why was he in that studio in the first place? Like what was actually going on here on any level that starts to raise the difficult questions that you're talking about? Because, it's going to be hard as we've both started normalizing at least some aspects of mental health difficulties in media dialogue. But part of that is trying to be sensitive to like not just invoking mental illness in a very casual way. I think I referred to something as crazy or crazy people earlier here. And I know from, contemporary journalistic style guides, I know from my kids' school teachers that like one of the things people are trying to do these days is not like call people crazy.
Right.
When you mean that you think their behavior is wrong or irrational or it doesn't make sense or something like that, but to like reserve this mental health terminology for like a real clinical context. But then that becomes challenging to talk about it in a sort of real world journalistic way at the speed of the news cycle.
Right. Sure.
Which is much too fast. It's Ye says something inflammatory on Twitter, and people are going to talk about it like within minutes, within hours. We're days later, and I feel like we're so low.
Look, and I also
think
think that some people are just jerks, and some people just have bad ideas, and that's not a mental health issue. You know, there's no cure for that. Mm-hmm. There's no cure for just a random bad take.
There's no cure for bad takes. But maybe if you listen to this show enough, it will all
it'll come together.
Out. So listen, we should wrap this up.
I think we should. I think we're there. I think we've unpacked this.
So I want to tell everybody, I thank you for listening to the show. Our recent couple episodes, numbers have been up, so that's great. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends. I would really appreciate if you've been liking the show, like go into Apple, give us a rating, give us a little review. That stuff matters a lot. Bad Takes is from Grid. Our producer is Olivia Reingold, and we will be back next week with more Bad Takes.